Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Cudd, joined by my co host, Patrick Fitzgerald. Today, we are going to basically recap all the free agent and trades, well, not all of them, but most of them, and how they kind of impact your fantasy teams for this upcoming year. We already got draft season going, PitchCon just happened, so we're in full swing with baseball. But before we get into all that, Patrick, how are you doing?
Hey John, I'm doing pretty well. I started my second draft, so it's my second NFBC 50. I figured it was a good time doing the first slow draft and keep learning the player pool. So yeah, I just picked Tanner Bybee around pick 190. Needed a little bit of innings to add to my staff. So yeah, draft season is well underway for me. How about you?
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different. First year player draft season's where I'm at right now. Just had one last weekend for one of my dynasty leagues, and I just joined a new dynasty league, and I think that draft should be starting up soon as well. So a little bit more dynasty focus for me right now, but TGFBI invites just went out today, so gonna have to start thinking about drafting in the NFC format as well. So that'll be a little different. I think mock drafts for that, or sorry, the drafts for that start end of February. So that, along with just a bunch of other stuff like home leagues, is going to be very interesting to navigate over the next couple weeks.
Yep, get ready for the crazy inflation and closers. I know TGFBI is a free league, so not as high pressure, but even in my 12 team drafts, the first one was pretty reasonable on closers. The second one, I think it was like 16 closers went in the first 11 rounds. So they were flying off the board. Almost every locked in closer was gone by like pick 130. So you gotta move quick.
Yeah, definitely there will be a lot of just thought going into how we figure all that out. But before we get to all of that, just a reminder, you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. You can send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. All right, as I mentioned, we are basically recapping all of the moves that happened, I think, at least this calendar year. I think the first move that we're going to talk about happened in the middle of December. So some of this will cover most of the big signings that happened or big trades that happened since I guess the pod that we talked about, that which was in like December, middle of December, or something like that. So a lot of this focus will be on how does this impact their fantasy value, right? Is this a good move for them? Is it a bad move for them? Is this a guy that you want to pick up because of this new place that they're going to be in? And so that's kind of what we're going to have as our focus. And so the first guy we're going to talk about is probably not on, maybe shallow league radar, but I think deep league radar is very interesting. That'd be Adolis Garcia, who is now moving to the Phillies. He's going to be the starting right fielder there. Nick Castellanos, I think, is still technically on the team. So I know that was kind of a conversation that we're thinking about cutting him when this move happened, but that has not necessarily been the case just yet. But Garcia last year slashed 227, 271, 394. So not a very good season. Did finish with 19 homers and 13 stolen bases. Current ADP, when we're looking at the RotoWire Online Championship for the last 2 weeks, is at 225. And those are 12-team leagues, correct?
Yep, yeah, 12 team, two catcher, five outfield. So a little
Okay,
bit bumped up to that.
so 12-team, but still pretty deep, nonetheless. So that's, yeah, like round 20 in a league like that. But yeah, any thoughts on Garcia and whether he's a target that you'd be looking at, kind of maybe filling that outfielder 4 or utility spot in kind of a regular 12-team 5x5 league?
Yeah. I think with the path to playing time that he seemingly has, and obviously in a pretty good lineup and a better park, he's a guy I'm definitely interested in. And kind of when I'm rounding out my starting lineup in the outfield, he's probably going to hurt you in batting average, but I think in the other categories he'll at least be like a neutral, if not plus somewhere. If he spikes a little bit more power like he used to. So yeah, I wouldn't call him a target, but I'm definitely open to taking him at price, and I do think his price is going to keep going up a little bit because the projections do seem to like him. So wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little bit closer to 200 as draft season rolls on a little bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if he's ever going to get to the 30 homer mark again. Last year, only had 547 plate appearances, so missed about and a half through weeks of games. So only got to 19 homers. Still feels like a guy who, probably in an ideal season finishes 25-15, right? That feels like maybe a good ceiling for him to get to, which does definitely play as like one of the guys who is a little bit further down your roster on a fantasy team.
Yeah, it's a chase heavy profile that we always were waiting for the bottom to fall out. And I think it took a little bit longer than we expected, but it has kind of come the last couple of years. So I wouldn't say I'm confident in him, but a more shallow league, like I'm okay taking a flyer on kind of a more upside guy like this towards the middle or back end of the draft.
Right. And like you said, it is kind of like dependent on your team construction because of his issues with his average, right? Like if you have a team that is already kind of filled with guys that maybe don't necessarily hit the ball for average, you probably don't want to be going out and getting Adolis there.
Yeah.
All right, next move is a move that's kind of interesting for your team. Shane Baz traded to the Orioles. Last year, 4.87 ERA and a 1.33 WHIP. It was his first full season in the majors just because he's been dealing with injuries for a good chunk of his career. 24.8% strikeout rate, 9% walk rate. Current ADP 194. Any thoughts on Shane Baz and whether we might be able to finally see a little bit of a breakout for him, or was the pitcher that we saw in Tampa Bay last year kind of maybe what we're going to expect to see again this year?
Yeah, I think might not see a full breakout, but he's definitely going to be better, right? Obviously, Tampa Bay was playing in Steinbrenner last year, and it's just a really tough place to pitch, and his numbers there were awful. So I think when we go from him thinking about him in Tropicana with the Rays to Camden with the Orioles, I think it's neutral just because more wins. Probably the Rays won't be as as good as the Orioles, hopefully at least. But Tropicana is a nice place to pitch, so I do think that Boz gets a little bit of an upgrade there. But at the same time, I think that's kind of baked into the price. Like the 194 ADP right now for a guy who seems likely to be a ratio neutral at best. You're paying for the strikeouts and you're paying for the upside. So I don't know if I'm targeting him in fantasy, but I would definitely expect an improvement more towards like a 4 ERA.
Yeah, I'm kind of even curious if there's really that much strikeout upside for him. He finished last year near 25% strikeout rate. If maybe I guess we're hoping for like a bump to like 27%, 28% maybe. But dropping back down to 23, 22% is certainly possible for Baz as well. I'd like to believe that he could be like a top 30 guy if everything works out, but feels like he's more in that range of guys that will be on your roster, but you could consider cutting, some weeks just because the track record hasn't been good for the last couple of days.
Yeah, might have to pick your spots a little bit with streams and stuff.
Yeah. Brandon Lowe traded to the Pirates. Kind of interesting for him. He finished as the number 6 second baseman on the player rater, Fangraphs player rater for last season. 256, 307, 477 slash line. So pretty solid numbers there. 31 homers, 79 runs, and 83 RBI. A little bit of caveat for him is, similar to Shane Baz, was that he was playing, at least half his games at Steinbrenner Field. So a little bit of a bump there. Going around the same spot as Baz as well at a 190 ADP. Just with all the understandings that we have about second base this year, I think there's been kind of, debate on like whether is it deep, is it not deep? Do you wait on second base or do you try to get a good second baseman early? Brandon Lowe is probably like a middle of the pack second baseman. Does his move to the Pirates kind of elevate him a little bit, or do you feel like he is still kind of around that maybe back half of the top 10 second baseman who will get you a decent amount of power, but honestly not much else beyond that?
Yeah, I don't think it changes too much for me. Both kind of below average offenses and not great parks. So I think he's a decent option, like you said, if you want to not necessarily punt second base, but wait on it a little bit. You have it's Matt McClain, Bryson Stott, Brandon Lowe, Xavier Edwards, all kind of go within 4 picks of each other in the recent draft. So I think I like Stott better, but maybe Lowe second out of that group. So the tough thing is that he played a lot of games last year, but he's really not known for that. So I don't think it's the type of thing where you can take one second baseman and he's your only one for a while because, he's probably has at least one IL stint coming this year. So yeah, I think that it's nice that the price didn't skyrocket or anything off of a really strong year. So he's still affordable, but I don't feel 100% confident in him, being my second baseman for 162 games.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's going to play 162 games, right? I think that's the first issue, and then like you mentioned, it's not necessarily like a great move going from Tampa Bay to Pittsburgh. And actually, he played 134 games last year. That's the most games he's played since 2021, which is kind of sad for a little bit. But he still, will get you a decent amount of power. The average was a little bit of an aberration this year, 256. That's his highest mark since the 2020 season. But second base is kind of a weird position, right? You could try to go with him and maybe I don't know, couple him with I don't know. Is Caleb Durbin a guy who like maybe you'd be thinking of like a sleeper second baseman? Um,
I think he might
Polanco.
be. I think he might be third base only now, Durbin. But yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
Polanco. I do like Labor Torres. The projections really like him. He's not going
Sure.
to
Yeah.
like 250. So I
hmm
think you could, you get one at 180, you get one at 250. That's not, a crazy level of investment in one position.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, if you get Brandon Lowe, make sure you get some insurance with that
Yeah.
pick as well. All right, another player going to the Pirates, one that you're probably a little bit more familiar with, Ryan O'Hearn, 281, 366, 437 slash line, combined with 17 homers last year. That all adds up to being the number 20 first baseman on the player rater. So really, in shallow leagues, you're not really considering O'Hearn at all. In deeper leagues, maybe he's an interesting corner infielder, util guy, but currently 297 ADP. So it seems like the market is not very excited about this move, anyways.
Yeah, it's just kind of he's a good hitter. He's a good real life hitter, right? He's had a couple good seasons, but it's kind of a low ceiling move in terms of he's historically platooned and he hits for, decent average, decent power, right? He doesn't do anything, exceptionally. But roster resource right now is showing both Lau and O'Hearn as not platooning, which kind of just shows you Pirates have some other lefties they might want to protect. I'm not sure if Spencer Horwitz is going to platoon like it says here. So I would kind of expect all of them to sit some games against lefties, but not all of them, which is better than their roles happened before. So yeah, O'Hearn's got that first base outfield eligibility. You might have to kind of pick your spots with matchups, but I do like him as a bench piece and someone you can rotate in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, the good or bad thing about being on the Pirates is that no one is really coming for your spot. Right now, their bench, according to roster resources, Henry Davis as the random catcher outfielder hybrid, Nick York, who's kind of fallen off for being the top prospect that he's been. Uh, I'm not even. Is it Justin? I don't
I
know.
think it's Yo Stinson. I think that's how they say
Yostinson. Okay,
it. Yeah.
Yostinson Garcia. Yeah, guy got some interesting power in the minors, but still has yet to really had any sort of major league experience. And then they've got Jack Sawinski in the outfield as well. So there's not really anyone who is like really competing for first base other than Spencer Horwitz, who is also a lefty. So it's unlikely someone's going to take any real like DH at bats from O'Hearn in that offense. And yet I don't know if there's too much to be excited there.
Yeah, things might get a little more crowded when, well, hopefully it's when Connor Griffin gets called up, but
hmm
you'll wait and see how that shakes out.
Yeah. All right. The first reliever we're going to talk about, I think only reliever we're going to talk about, P. Fairbanks staying in Florida, but going to Miami. Had 27 saves last year with Tampa Bay, 2.83 ERA, 1.0 for WHIP, 24.2% strikeout rate. Current ADP at 115. Does this move at all mean anything to you? I think Fairbanks probably, to me at least, stays around the same rating that he would have been had he stayed in Tampa Bay. But yeah, any thoughts here on this move?
Yeah, the biggest thing that it means to me is we won't have to be driven insane by the Marlins refusing to have a closer. So that'll be nice, at least, for the games that Fairbanks is healthy. His value doesn't really change too much for me either. I don't think it's still like a slightly below average team, and he's a solid pitcher, but it seems unlikely to, pitch 60 innings or get 30 saves. So I'm seeing him in the ADP. The closest closer to him is Jeff Hoffman right above him. I think I probably prefer Hoffman. Maybe I like him better than Pagan, though, who's a couple of picks earlier. I know Pagan was great last year, but I'm not sure how much to trust it. So, yeah, I think I'm comfortable with him at price, but I'm probably targeting Hoffman. I actually just got him in my most recent draft right around this price. So,
And one thing I think is important to always remember is that the quality of your team doesn't usually actually impact how many saves you get. Like, yes, the Marlins are not great, right? They're probably going to. They did have 79 wins last year, so they could reach 500 this year. It's not impossible. But the number of saves that Fairbanks is going to get is probably not going to vary too much, other than maybe plus or minus 5, I'd say, by the win loss record that the Marlins end up having. And so it's more about kind of, is he getting the strikeouts, right? Is he able to limit runs and limit the walks and hits? And I think that skill is still going to be there for him, and he'll be, I think, a really solid, second reliever on your team if you're looking for saves.
Yeah, a lot of the save opportunities is variance, and the team quality. I think it matters, but only at a certain point. You want a guy who's at least on a team that's going to win like 70 games, right? If you're got a guy who's on a bad team, you're going to get some zero save weeks, and it's just going to drive you crazy. So I think you want at least like a competent team, so that the Marlins do fit that bill.
For sure, yeah. And I guess we also don't have to deal with Tampa Bay's maddening, like who's the closer sort of question too. So that is a little nicer to have a little bit more consistency from Fairbanks as well.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be kind of a group of guys that's going to be kind of interesting. First, we're going to start with Tatsuya Imai, who we talked about at length a couple episodes ago. He's going to Houston, which I think is a very fun spot for him to land. Good pitching development there for sure. And 163 ADP, right? So in this league, that's kind of round 14-ish. I really am interested in Imai. Obviously, I've been kind of in the first year player draft headspace for a little bit. So he's going number one, I think, in most first year player drafts. But in terms of redraft, where do you like Imai in kind of his current landing spot, and what would be like a reasonable expectation from him in terms of maybe like some of the other pitchers that he's getting drafted around?
Yeah, in the range, it's Robbie Ray, Sandy, Drew Rasmussen, Trevor Rogers, Imai, and then kind of a gap until Shota. So I think he generally fits in that range, but he's not my favorite target there necessarily. He's a guy who did have control issues before last season in NPB. So like I heard the Joe Ryan fastball comps, and that was really exciting. But then you think about part of what makes Joe Ryan so good is that he spots his fastballs up in the zone so consistently. So it's nice to have similar stuff, but you also have to have the location. And I don't think he's at that level, and might not even be close to it. So I'm a little concerned about how he might, kind of adjust to life in MLB. I think he'll be good in the long run, but I don't think I'm in on him at this price necessarily.
Yeah, min pick at 127, max pick at 182. So he's going in that 10 to 15 range right now. And that seems about right for a guy who we don't know too much about him, but it feels like he could be a decent pitcher in the majors. So it's kind of in that SP3, SP4, SP5 range, right? Where you already have established your rotation on your fantasy team, and now you're kind of looking for maybe some gems in the rough to fill out that roster.
Yeah, I think I'm more aggressively targeting some pitchers in the 125 to 150 ADP range. That's where like Emmett Sheehan, Sonny Gray, Ryan Pepio, Michael King, Pablo Lopez, Trey Savage, like those are all guys that I'm more interested in. So maybe if that range gets really pushed up, I'd turn to Imai, but I think I'm more comfortable getting, two guys from that range than going down to him.
Yeah. The next two, Kazuma Okamoto going to the Blue Jays, and Mentaka Murakami going to the White Sox. These two guys are just going to be linked because they're both third basemen from Japan, although there's kind of some risk that they might end up playing first base in the majors. Murakami going at 211 and Okamoto going at 235. So really pretty much like end of your drafts sort of pickups. Obviously the take on Murakami is that he's all power, but unfortunately not much else. The swing and miss is a real thing with him. Okamoto is a little bit more of a controlled bat. Maybe doesn't have the power potential, but maybe a more well-rounded player. Thoughts on either of these guys, kind of taking them at the end of your drafts as a flyer? Is that something that you'd be interested in? Or are there other sleeper picks that you feel like you'd be more interested in looking at?
Yeah, I think Murakami is the guy who I'd be interested in having one or two shares of just in case he goes huge. And he he's not going to play third base. Doesn't sound like, right? So he'll
Yeah.
hopefully get first base eligibility too. So, in those like CI leagues, that'll be nice eligibility to be able to move him around a little bit. But you do have to you don't have to build your team for him, but you have to have a really comfortable batting average basis set. So let's say maybe you took like Jacob Wilson or Stephen Kwan or, somebody like that in the 150 to 200 range. Then you could pair with Murakami, but he is going to probably hit, just above 200. And Okamoto, I think, lower ceiling, but he's in a really good offense, and it sounds like he's going to play at least close to every day. So I took him at like 270 in a draft. Now the price is a little bit higher, so tougher decision, but also another guy who sounds like maybe they'll move him around a little bit, but it's not quite as clear. So maybe you could get, multi-positional eligibility at some point.
Yeah, like with Okamoto, obviously Vlad's at first, so he's not taking over first base in that offense. And they'll probably shuffle him around a little bit. Right now he's penciled in at third base on roster resource. Murakami, like you mentioned, first base is more likely the spot for him. Although they have Miguel Vargas penciled in at third, so it's not like that's a situation where that's like, oh, they had a really good third baseman, that's why they don't have Murakami playing there. I guess it's interesting though that NFC currently has Murakami as a third baseman. I believe Fantrax also has Murakami as a third baseman as well. So I'm curious how that eligibility will work going into the season, whether he'll be able to be slotted in third base despite not playing third base at all in the majors this year, if that ends up happening.
It might just be based on whatever they played most last year, maybe in NPB. I don't know how they typically do that for the international guys.
Right, which is to say, this might be the only year that you can get Murakami with third base eligibility. Just like that one random year that Vlad got third last year, and it was so much fun, and now he's back to only first base eligibility. So.
Yeah.
All right, next one, Edward Cabrera getting traded to the Cubs. I think this is a very interesting trade. Cabrera last year, 3.53 ERA, 1.23 WHIP, 25.8% strikeout rate, 8.3% walk rate, going in at 188 ADP. So actually after Imai. And, with Cabrera, I think most people kind of understand, like he's just going to be a little wild, right? The strikeout rate's maybe not as high as you would hope it would be with a guy who has the stuff that he has. Right, the ratios aren't great either, but there's just so much potential in this guy. But he is going into his age 28 season, so maybe he's kind of gone through all development possible, and obviously he's been with the Miami as well, some of the best pitching development in the majors. So he might be kind of at the peak of what we would expect him to be. Any thoughts on Cabrera moving to the Cubs, and if that is going to be kind of a good landing spot for him, or if it's just going to be kind of more of the same for him, and he's just going to kind of end up as like this guy who is kind of at the tail end of your rotation. Probably you want to keep on your team regardless, but you'd be willing to drop him if something better comes along.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn about this one. Definitely a situational upgrade, right? No doubt about that. Better team, and Chicago, the wind blows in pretty often, so a lot of pitchers there are able to have success. But at the same time, this is his first time clearing 100 innings in MLB, right? It's only the second year he's really been like an objectively good pitcher. But at the same time, Nick talked a lot about how these adjustments were real, right? He stopped throwing. I think he leaned into the sinker more and de-emphasized the four seam, and he was able to command the sinker a lot better. So maybe it's just a more natural pitch for him, and that was, allowed him to at least have a half decent walk rate as opposed to a really bad one. But it's hard for me to buy in at this price, coming off of his best health year and one of his best performance years too. I think maybe I prefer him to Boz, but it's kind of close, and I think I probably will end up just passing on both. Like, might prefer the stability of a Tanner Bybee here, at least most times around.
Yeah, get like an innings eater instead of maybe one of those guys who really high ceiling if everything works out, but more likely than not, it's going to be kind of a middling floor because of injuries and just inconsistency.
Yeah, and in that draft that I'm doing right now, my first three starters are Wu, DeGrom, and Glass now. So I needed a little stability in there. That's not usually how I build my team, but that's how I ended up this time.
Right, unless you're going like Logan Webb, Framber Valdez, and another innings eater, right? And you're like first three pitchers. It's kind of hard to take these dart throws at some of these guys who are dealing with health issues in these later rounds.
Definitely a little scary.
Then that construction that you've got going there. One interesting thing I thought about Cabrera is just that he's a really high ground ball guy. 46% last year. Not a huge fly ball pitcher. 34% last season. So curious to see if that the basically the Wrigley effect will have any effect on him at all with the wind blowing in. All right. One other move that happened a couple days ago: Brendan Donovan traded to the Mariners, so another second baseman. And Brendan Donovan is kind of just a guy who does everything kind of well-ish, but not a star in any sort of way. Kind of evidenced by the 304 ADP. Now he's going to the Mariners, right? So that's a park that just is not great for power, but is pretty decent for. Can be decent for other stuff, I guess. But yeah, any thoughts on whether Brendan Donovan becomes more relevant because of this, or if he's still a guy that's just going to be on the waiver wire?
Yeah, definitely one of those better in real life than fantasy guys, but I do think this is an upgrade for him, despite, Seattle being a tough place to hit. He's going to be hitting atop a better lineup, and it seems like he is going to play third base, so he's going to have that really nice second base, third base eligibility where, you get the MI, the CI, and the two positions themselves. So I'd be pretty surprised if his ADP doesn't go up like at least 30 picks. Like I'm looking at this now, and he's behind guys like Evan Carter, Mark Vientos, Ernie Clement. Like I think that he should be going above those type of guys. And I also would add that this ADP probably is a little outdated, right? A lot of these are slow drafts where the data isn't getting uploaded yet, like like the ones I'm doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he even gets close to 250, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if we assume roster resource is accurate and he does bat first, basically he's protected by Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez, right? This is a guy who only managed 64 runs last year, right? If he just gets on base at the same clip that he was last year, at 353 on base percentage, right? Like you'd probably expect those run numbers to go up, probably 20 maybe with those guys behind him. So, assuming the ratios kind of stay the same with Donovan, we could see a little bit of a bump in some of the counting stats.
Yeah, I think I'm just speculating, but I think he's going to hit leadoff against righties and then lefties. He'll probably bump down in the lineup. It looks like he struggles 650 career OPS against lefties. So I don't think they'll sit him because Seattle's still, the lineup isn't crazy deep, but I think it'll be purely leadoff against righties. But yeah, I'd expect more like 75 runs if he can, stay healthy and play 150 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess if you're up there against righties, that's still probably like 75% of your games you're going to be in that spot anyways. So
yeah, exactly.
Nice. All right, one other move, moving to the NL Central, Alex Bregman now going to the Cubs. Huge move there. Now moving from the Red Sox to the Chicago Cubs. 273, 360, 462 slash line. 18 homers and 495 plate appearances. So last year, clearly not one of his good years. He was dealing with some injuries throughout the year. So, that's maybe a little bit of the excuse for why there was lower production. He also goes from one of the better parks for right-handers at Fenway. Obviously, you got the monster there, to one of the worst parks by StatCast park factors for righties. 121 ADP. Third base is kind of an interesting situation in terms of player depth because it is like Jose Ramirez, and then the drop off is, I wouldn't say it's steep, right? You got Junior Caminero, who really proved some stuff last year. Jazz has third base eligibility. Manny Machado's kind of his normal regular self, but Bregman, definitely not in the top 5 third baseman conversation anymore. Is this a guy that you'd be excited to grab at probably end of the 10th round according to this ADP? Or would you rather, grab a third baseman earlier or pass on him and get one of the maybe a little bit of a more sleeper pick after him?
I don't know if I'd be excited to get him at price, but I would definitely consider it if I got shut out of the early third baseman. I've gotten Austin Riley both times so far, and then I've felt good about that. Bregman is tough. It's the ceiling feels a lot lower not playing in Fenway or Houston, where, he could either have really good batting average or hit more homers. I think it's going to be, I can't imagine Alex Bregman being a bad hitter, right? I just think it'll be slightly less useful in fantasy in terms of a lower average and probably, 20 to 23 home runs. So I think Suarez, who we're going to talk about more later, leapfrogs him, with them going to very different destinations, but I'm still considering him because at his price, it's him and Westberg and Suarez. and then Noelvi Marte, who I don't like, and then Matt Chapman and Royce Lewis are, round out the top 12. And I think Chapman is the only one I feel comfortable being my starting third baseman there. So if I'm in a spot where, I don't feel crazy good about anyone else who's out there and I don't want to purely bank on, getting Chapman, then yeah, I think I'd consider Bregman.
Yeah, one of my dynasty leagues, I made a trade of Freddie Freeman and Logan Henderson for Bregman, Trevor Story, and Clay Holmes, which it was more of a trade of getting off Freeman because he's a little bit older now, and I was like, I needed a third baseman too, so Bregman was available there. It's like he's I think he's going to be fine. He just won't be elite anymore, which I think is just unfortunate to have to deal with. And he does kind of, to me, and I think the ADP also would evidence it, that he's just kind of a little bit better than Chapman, but not like so much better that you need to go out of your way to make sure you get Bregman if Chapman is still on the board.
Yeah, seems like they should score a lot of runs though. I mean, that lineup is really strong top to bottom, and it seems like he's going to hit second. So I like that.
You mentioned it, Ranger Suarez to the Red Sox, 3.2 ERA, 1.22 WHIP, 23.2% strikeout rate, and a 5.8% walk rate. Last year, though, he threw the most innings he had in the season at 157, which is not a lot, and his ADP is at 173. So for this guy who just got this relatively big contract, I'm kind of surprised that he's basically going in the 15th round. But yeah, any thoughts on Ranger and whether you like him going to Boston?
Yeah, I'm a little scared about this one. You talked about I guess he's not injury prone, but he's just not a workhorse, right? He's thrown 125 innings each of the last 4 years and 150 plus in 3 of them, but never 160, right? So he's going to be out there probably for like 28 starts, but probably not 32. I have concerns about him. He's already a whip risk guy, and he's moving to Fenway, which is pretty friendly for a run. So I am concerned about that. I don't think I'm going to have him too much at his price as a result of that. But if you've built a team that has a pretty good whip build so far and you can withstand it, I think it's okay. I guess it would have been worth considering for me because DeGrom and Wu is a really strong whip pairing and could take the risk with Suarez. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to have too much of him either.
Yeah, I think my problem is I just don't know what he does like at an elite level, right? I think he's like fine at this range, he's probably going as an SP5, SP6, and you're just like, the ratios are okay. The strikeouts aren't, anything to talk about. He doesn't necessarily. He might get. I don't know. He probably won't get more wins going to Boston compared to what he was getting in Philly. No. And yeah, I just nothing about his profile like screams exciting, right? And maybe that's kind of the issue with pitchers in this ADP, right? We already talked about Shane Baz. We talked about Tatsuya Imai. Right? These are guys who they could be interesting, but maybe there's more interesting guys afterwards who, yes, they're more injury prone, but they have a higher ceiling, right? They've got more potential even though they got the lower floor. And these guys are a little bit more like floor establishers rather than ceiling raisers.
Yeah, and his velo is kind of teetering on like a concerning level in terms of the trend. It's been down 2 ticks on both the fastball and the sinker since 2023. So he's hitting 90 on the sinker, 91 on the fastball, which is fine for a lefty, right? You can still get outs and be successful. But it's the type of thing where if it's to fall a little bit more, then it gets to a concerning level where there's just not a whole lot of guys out there who can be successful with that low velocity. So I'm probably going to keep an eye on, how he's looking in spring training, even though it's not, a huge deal, but I'd like to see, him sitting comfortably above 91.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of those guys who I think could be a ceiling raiser, assuming he stays healthy, which is a really, really big if, is Ryan Weathers, who was traded to the Yankees. That big if is kind of evidenced by the fact that he only pitched 8 games last year, 3.99 ERA, 1.28 WHIP, 22% strikeout rate. So not even great numbers in the 8 games that he played, but just oozing with potential, I think, just based on what we saw in spring training and also a few of his starts. He should have a spot in the starting rotation on opening day with Carlos Rodon, with Garrett Cole, and I guess technically Clark Schmidt on the injured list. I don't even know Clark Schmidt's coming to pitch in 2026. But he is currently listed as the number 4 guy on roster resource. So I don't think I don't think Cole's coming back for opening day right now. He might. Rodon is also questionable for opening day. So right now, it looks like Weathers has a spot in the rotation. That's all to be said. 258 ADP, which I think is probably okay considering of the health. But if everything clicks for Weathers and he manages to stay on this Yankees rotation, is this a guy that you'd like to target in drafts?
Yeah, it's tough. I was so in on him last year. I drafted him and then he got hurt in spring training, fabbed him when he came back, right? And the price is already shooting up. I think he was more like 300, before the trade. So I would still go for him at 250 just to like have a share. I'm seeing like Shane Smith, Kodai Senga, Ryan Nelson. I definitely like him more than those guys around him. But, the injuries are at this point, I think you can call him injury prone. It's interesting. The Yankees seem to be taking like the Dodgers type approach to pitching where it's like all our pitchers are going to get injured. Hopefully we just have like 4 or 5, at some point. Obviously not as stacked as the Dodgers, but a similar kind of feel to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad strategy if you're just like everyone's gonna get hurt, so we're just gonna replace all our hurt guys with like really really elite guys who also get hurt, and eventually it'll work out. It also helps that they have a really good the Dodgers. It helps that they have a really good depth chart in terms of the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th pitcher, because like half the guys that they have buried in AAA would be probably like a number 4 starter on some other team right now. So kind of nice to have the money and also have the scouting ability to get those guys.
Yep, I'm sure I'm gonna see, whether it's in 97 in spring training like he was last year and, get all excited again.
Oh
It
yeah,
just feels
completely.
inevitable.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how he does. I am definitely rooting for him to at least do something cool when he's in New York. Lefty though, right, in New York, which could be interesting. But Max Fried showed that it could work out. So maybe Weathers can be the little can be really helpful there as well. But speaking of the evil empire, Kyle Tucker going to the Dodgers. Man, I thought for sure he was going to the Mets, and then just LA just swoops in at the last minute and pays this man $60 million a year. So works out for him because he goes from one of the worst parts of right-handers, as we mentioned in Wrigley, to one of the best in Dodger Stadium. Of course, last year he did deal with injuries. 22 homers, 25 stolen bases still, though. 266, 377, 464 slash line. So not the numbers that you were kind of hoping from him, but, still pretty decent. Current ADP at 15, so still a lot of belief in his ability, basically going at the beginning of the second round or maybe even tail end of the first. Is Kyle Tucker a guy that you think sneaks into the end of the first round at all? Or is this a guy who it's still maybe you want to pump the brakes on him just a tiny bit because of the injury risk?
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to be going in the first round in some places. Obviously, he will in a fair amount of 15 teamers, but probably even some 12. So I was like looking forward to kind of buying a little bit low on him this year, getting him in the middle of the second round. And then obviously he goes and signs with the Dodgers, and, that's kind of out the window. So yeah, I really like him. He's very well rounded. Maybe not elite anywhere, but I think him being on the Dodgers now, that the counting stats are probably going to be borderline elite. So yeah, I like Kyle Tucker. I've been comfortable picking him in the first round in the past, and maybe he'll have to pay that next year. Looks like he went at 11 in my draft, so people are definitely getting fired up.
Yeah, max pick on him based on this RotoWire OC data, which I don't know how late it dates back to. The one at least I'm looking at. Pick 22, or sorry, pick 22, which I don't think he's going to last till pick 22 at this point. So yeah, if you want Kyle Tucker, just hopefully you're kind of picking at the end of the first round, because I don't think to me, there was a point where he would have been in that conversation for top half of the first round, right? Like maybe picks 5 and 6. But I just think the injury risk is maybe a little too high at this point. And the guys who are already there, right? And like Juan Soto, Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt Jr. I just think the durability of those guys is just a little bit better than what Tucker has shown over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I did take Tatis over him in my first draft, but I think that was maybe right before he signed with the Dodgers. Maybe not. It's pretty close though at this point. I think, it's kind of a 50-50 situation for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What will be nice, I think Dave Roberts has said that he's going to be batting second or third. And yeah, you just read off the top four of that lineup: Shohei, Mookie, or Kyle Tucker at 2 or 3, Freddy at 4, Will Smith at 5, Muncy at 6, Teoscar at 7. And then they have to round it out with Pages and Hyesung Kim. But yeah, that's just still a very elite lineup, and he's going to rack up a ton of counting stats there.
Yeah, I'm like a little worried about Freeman and some of the pitchers because I think the Dodgers just don't care about the regular season anymore because they're so good. But like, I don't think that's going to apply to Kyle Tucker. I think he's young enough and he's such a star that he's going to be in there. But older guys like Freeman, maybe best, but probably not. And definitely the pitching. It feels like if anything is nagging them, they're just going to take 10 or 15 days on the IL because like they have that kind of cushion at this point. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, a player that did go to the Mets, Bo Bichette, 311, 357, 43 slash line, but only 18 homers and four stolen bases. So the ratios were really, really good. But the counting stats, at least the power stats, not so much. He did cut down on his striker rate by quite a bit, but it didn't really result in an increase in his walk rate. So in OBP leagues, I think Bichette's kind of weird because 357 OBP is like not. It's good, but it's not like, elite numbers there. He did finish as the number 7 shortstop on the player rater, although even though that sounds low, that's because shortstop's just a really deep position. So, yes, there's the homers and the stolen bases aren't there compared to some of the other elite shortstops, but, still good ratios nonetheless. 98 ADP here. I think he gets third base eligibility this season. I'm assuming they're keeping Lindor at short. So maybe that helps him a little bit in the eyes of managers. But yeah, any thoughts on Bichette going to the Mets and kind of is this a good move for him?
Yeah, I think probably it's pretty neutral in terms of his fantasy value. I think the lineup is similar. The park probably not quite as good, but the double eligibility at short and third is going to be really nice. I was hoping to target him as like a shortstop who would gain second base eligibility because of how bad second base is, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. So yeah, around this range, I think he's interesting, right? Like Trevor Story, Jeremy Pena in this range, with infielders. I like Seiya Suzuki and probably Rosarena more than him. They're the outfielders who go right ahead of him. So I think he fits in well with the range. And yeah, if you're looking for a little bit of flexibility for your team, I think that might put him over the top of some of those other guys. But it is an interesting profile in terms of, he's not necessarily a plus anywhere but batting average, but hopefully he kind of contributes a little bit everywhere else.
Yeah, still 94 RBI last year, so that's definitely nothing to look down on. It's still a far cry from where he was after the 2021 season, where it was thought that like Bichette is like a consensus, like top 3 pick. And since that point, he just has not reached those heights. The most homers he's had since that 29 season was 24 the year right after that, and it's kind of come down ever since. And the stolen base numbers aren't where they were before. The Mets do seem to be okay with guys running, so maybe that goes up now that he's going to New York. But yeah, it is kind of a weird thing for a guy to drop so much from basically like a top 5 pick to going in the 8th round ish, 8th, 9th round. But yeah, if he does get that third base eligibility, it'll be pretty nice. I don't think he's getting second because of the workhorse that Semien is. He's just not going to let him play second.
Yeah, and third base is a lot of times where you look for power, so he doesn't quite fit in neatly with that. But if you have a pretty balanced team, I definitely consider him where he's going.
Yeah. Cody Bellinger going back to the Yankees. He had a really good year last year, 9th outfielder on the player radar. It was his first season above 150 games played since 2019. 272, 334, 480 slash line with 29 homers, 13 stolen bases, 76 ADP here. Bellinger back in the Yankees, so obviously there's no real change there in terms of the team makeup. It's pretty much the same roster and lineup around him still. Do we think he returns top 10 outfielder status? Because I don't know if he's getting drafted like that right now. But, with outfielder, it's still a very premium position. I think I probably would expect maybe some increase in his ADP just a little bit. But, yeah, any thoughts on whether Bellinger can kind of just return what he did last year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a slight step back, but you don't have to pay for the full thing. He's 17th outfielder right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see him move ahead of Byron Buxton, who's 16th. So yeah, he's right on the precipice of that top 15, and very solid. All categories contributor. He almost 30 homers with 15 steals last year. So I would expect a slight step back in the homer department and maybe a little in the average, but he cut the strikeout rate too. It looks like career low last year. So yeah, I think that what he did last year is relatively repeatable, especially, in a really good offense and a solid place for lefties to hit. So I don't know if he is like a target of mine, but I think I'd probably be willing to take him a little bit ahead of ADP, I would say. The uneven performance, for his career is a little concerning because you're hoping to get someone who's a little more stable at that high of a pick, but the upside is definitely high. So yeah, I think I generally do like Bellinger.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast to Buxton because we often think of Buxton as like a guy who struggles to get above like 100 games played. Bellinger is not a chronically hurt guy, right? He had 130 games the year before, 130 the year before that, 144. So he's still, getting above 550 plate appearances. It's not like he's missing like months at a time. But that does just cut into the counting stats, right? For a guy who, ideally in a perfect season at this point in his career could go 30-15, right? You miss 30 games and all of a sudden you're down to like maybe a 25-10 guy or something like that. So the ratios are kind of important for a guy like Bellinger to retain some value in fantasy. But the counting stats, I think, are at least this point have been pretty consistent where he'll get probably like around 25 homers and then around 10 steals.
Yeah, and no reason. I know the Yankees haven't brought in anyone big, but there's no reason to expect them to, not score a ton of runs again. So, high floor there.
Yeah. Moving on to some elite pitchers getting moved. So Freddy Peralta getting traded to the Mets. Underrated. Tobias Myers also getting traded with him. I think was a pretty good move by the Mets there. But 2.7 ERA, 1.08 WHIP, 28% strikeout rate. So really elite stuff there. Eighth best pitcher on the player radar, 59 ADP right now. Yeah, I like this move. Obviously, the Brewers were the best team in the National League last year, in the regular season, I should say. So there's probably not really a big change in terms of number of wins that Freddie is going to have to deal with here. Last year was a career year for him, though, so that's maybe something to keep into account. I don't, maybe we can't legitimately say that Freddie's going to get an ERA under 3, but the other stuff, right? A whip of 1.08, a 28% strikeout rate. Do we feel like that stuff is going to kind of stick around, and then maybe the ERA is kind of hovering around 3 next year or this season?
Yeah, I think that a 3 ERA would be a great outcome for him. I think I'm fading, unfortunately. He's probably one of my biggest fades out of the guys that we've talked about today. The price, like I thought it was already too high at like low 60s, and then he went into the top 60, and it's just I don't know. I don't think this is really an upgrade necessarily. The Brewers are good, and Milwaukee's a good place to pitch, just like Citi Field. So yeah, I think that he'll be a good strikeout guy, and I think the other stats, he'll just kind of be decent. I do expect, a good amount of regression in the ERA, probably more like 3.3 to 3.5. I think some of the projections have him at like 3.7, which is a little harsh, but I don't think I'm quite in at this price. Max Fried's like a couple of picks ahead of him. I think I'd almost definitely prefer Fried. Him against Logan Webb is tough because Webb has the whip concerns and they're pretty close in ADP. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna have any Peralta this year, but I think it's just more of a price thing than a reflection of how good of a pitcher he is. Just tough to buy high. The 2.7. We talked about him like a month ago, maybe, right? He runs the low BABIPs and the good strand rates, but even for him, they were kind of outlier marks last year.
Yeah, I mean, previous 3 seasons before last year, 3.68 ERA, 3.86 ERA, 3.58 ERA, right? Year before that, 2.81, so kind of nice there. But this is a guy who consistently finishes with kind of a mid to high threes ERA. So expecting him to repeat a 2.7 ERA is borderline crazy. This is Professor Chaos, right? That's what Nick likes to call him. The strikeout rates are great, but the walk rates can be a little high sometimes. And so that leads to a guy who is exciting, but at sometimes can really hurt your team as well.
Right, and I guess like he is kind of as close to a workhorse as it gets these days, right? He doesn't he's not a huge quality starts guy, I think, because of some of the control concerns, but he's thrown basically 500 innings over the last 3 years, even a little more than that. So he's consistently making, 30 plus starts. So that's pretty big these days when it seems like every pitcher is an injury risk.
Yeah. All right, another interesting trade. Mackenzie Gore getting traded to the Rangers. He goes to a much more pitcher-friendly park in Texas. Last year, the stats were kind of middling, 4.17 area, 1.35 whip, but he did finish with a 27% strikeout rate. So saw a little bit of the potential there. He now goes to, a pretty decent rotation. And I don't know, I feel weird about this because I think Mackenzie Gore last year was like really good in the strikeout area. And then just like what, the other results though weren't that great. But he's kind of shown a lot of consistency. 30 games started last year, 32 games started the year before. Any thoughts on Mackenzie Gore? 191 ADP. So this is a guy who, again, is going around that range that we were talking about of Ranger Suarez, and I don't know.
Cabrera, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if I feel good about Gore compared to all those other guys as well. Like he probably just feels around the same to me.
Yeah, this one's really tough for me too. Like I would draft him here, but I wouldn't feel confident. Like he has a career 1.4 whip, and that's scary. But how much of that was Washington's horrible defense, and how much of it is the fact that he objectively does get hit hard, right? He gives up a lot of line drives, a lot of hard contact that are more likely to be base hits. So, how unlucky is the 324 BABIP? Maybe not that unlucky, right? But Texas is a great place to pitch. They have a really good defense, or at least a decent one. So those are going to be big upgrades for Gore. So I think that his price really shooting up makes sense, and I would be open to taking him here. But he's a guy with huge prospect pedigree, and it always kind of feels like there's one bigger believer in Gore in your draft room than me. Like I think he went like 170 in my draft, so didn't really get the chance to consider him. So I think if he's ever going to break out, now it's going to be the time, right? This is the best situation he's ever been in. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but I'm still very aware of the whip risk for sure.
Yeah, and he's still relatively young going into his age 27 season, right? So he is kind of reaching that peak that that the age curves like to predict. So there could be definitely a little bit more improvement from him. I mean, I think the strikeout numbers from last year were very encouraging, right? I think that for sure was a good thing to see. It's just whether he can bring everything else into the package. But I think he's getting drafted like that type of guy who like has one really good skill and the other ones are slowly coming along.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this move, I loved it in my mental draft, mental kind of rankings because I love this player. But Eugenio Suarez going back to the Reds, which is very fun. Last year he hit 49 homers between Arizona and Seattle, and not all of those homers were in Arizona. He did hit a few of those in Seattle, so the power still traveled. Unfortunately, though, the ratio is not that great, 228. Average, 298 OBP, but a 526 slugging because obviously you hit 49 homers. He did finish with over 100 RBI in his last 2 seasons, and now he goes to a Reds team that, I mean, is loaded with talent, that's for sure, but is the talent actually producing anything? That's kind of another question. 122 ADP. We kind of just talked about Bregman and, kind of the state of third base and where that is. I think Eugenio kind of slots in the same place-ish. But yeah, thoughts on Eugenio and whether this move is. I mean, I think it's going to be a good move because it's to the Reds, right? That's gonna help offense for sure. But is this a move that has him leap up in your third base rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it has to be. I was going to be pretty out on him, and this one has me, thinking about it a little bit more. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him, shoot up 20 picks, close to pick 100, just because it kind of is the perfect landing spot. But similar to Murakami, you got to build a really strong average base here. Suarez, career 246, but the last few years have been worse. So yeah, the Reds, they for as good of a park as it is, their offenses always seem to be bad, and it's really kind of confusing. But I don't think they've quite figured things out from a development perspective. But yeah, I think if you find yourself in need of power, you're good in speed, you're good in average. You can look for Suarez, kind of be similar to an Austin Riley type profile, but a lot more volatile and a little bit worse batting average. So Yeah, I think I like him as, if you don't want to dive into the later third base pool, but I'd probably prefer to wait for Chapman if I'm considering Suarez.
Yeah, if there's any reason to potentially pump the brakes a little bit, he did set like career highs for max EV um, and hard hit rate last year, which like is kind of incredible to do in your age 33 season, right? He's going to be turning 34 this year, and age kind of comes from us all. It is a little surprising that like these types of numbers, right, hard hit rate, max EV are going up as he's aging. So that could regress, and I don't expect him to hit 49 homers again, right? But if he's like a 30 homer hitter, with 90 RBI, you can maybe overlook the warts at average a little bit. But it's going to be he's not a top 5 third baseman all of a sudden because of this, but it becomes a very interesting conversation of whether you like him or Bregman. I think at this spot.
Yeah, and I feel a lot better about it if he wasn't so bad when he got traded to Seattle. Like first half, second half, I think this is all-star break split, so it's not quite down the middle, but basically a 900 OPS in the first half and a 730 in the second half, and then the strikeout rate went from 27 to 34. So that's a pretty big and slightly concerning jump. He's a streaky guy, so you kind of got to be prepared to stomach that.
Yeah. And the last move, which happened this morning, Framber Valdez is going to the Tigers, which I think is a very interesting move. I hate it because obviously as a Twins fan, now I have to face Framber Valdez so many times this year. But 3.66 ERA, 1.2 for WHIP, 23% strikeout rate. He's thrown 176 plus innings the last 4 seasons. One of the most consistent guys in the majors. 104 ADP. So again, going in that range that we kind of discussed. Who was the other pitcher? I guess we haven't really discussed a pitcher going in this range, but regardless, kind of the guy that going 8th, 9th round, maybe your SP2, SP3 target, depending on how you invested in offense early on. But yeah, Framber going to Detroit. How do you feel about this move?
Yeah, I mean, great landing spot for him. Definitely was unexpected and definitely a little bit bummed that the Orioles didn't get him. It seemed like they had a decent shot, but pretty big contract in terms of AAV, so I'm not surprised they didn't match it. But if this price stays, I'm definitely all in. I do have, trepidation about the whip generally, but I think that the price is, it bakes in that concern. I think with him in Detroit, I don't think there's that big of a difference between him and Logan Webb. So, if he's going pick 90 or later, I could definitely see myself getting him. Would have been nice to, have him sign a little bit earlier to go get him. But, maybe in some future drafts, I'll be able to add him to my team.
Right. And I think it's important to know, like Valdez does not get a ton of strikeouts, right? And the ratios aren't pristine, but he's just consistent. And that's kind of the main thing. Granted, the quality start numbers have dropped off a little bit since I think he had 26 like 3 seasons ago. But nonetheless, right? He still had 20 quality starts last year. Like that's really good. So in quality start leagues, for sure, he's worth paying up a little bit extra for. And then with the Tigers, who, I mean, if I'm just being honest, they're just far and away the best team in the AL Central right now. Like the Royals are decent, but I think the Tigers, in terms of talent-wise, just have more right now. So it's still going to be a team that gets you a decent amount of wins compared to where he was in Houston. And yeah, I just think it's just a really solid move for him. And I think to me, I don't know if there's going to be too much adjustment in the ADP. I think there's just adjustment of like, oh, we know where he's going now. But, in terms of maybe what his projections would be, I wouldn't say they like dramatically change now that he's in Detroit. But I do think you can feel confident about going out and grabbing him.
Yeah, it's so frustrating how all the Tigers had to do was make one good move, and now they're the runaway favorites. Meanwhile, the Orioles have made like 8 moves, and they're still projected to finish 4th. It's
Yeah,
tough.
right.
But
Yeah.
Framber, yeah, he's a rock. I mean, I think the only time he's missed time with injury in like the last 5 years was like when he got hit by a comebacker and he broke his finger. Like he's made 31, 31, 28, 31 starts the last 4 years. So, you can feel really good about his health, kind of similar to Peralta.
Yeah. One move, I don't actually remember if we talked about this last time, so I think I'm just going to talk about it now because I think it's interesting to think about nonetheless. Pete Alonso going to Baltimore. Right. This is a guy who hits a crap ton of homers, right? He's done that for a while now. Now he goes from Now he goes to a new park, right? But the Baltimore, that was it the 1 year of Baltimore, or was it a couple seasons?
Maybe two. Yeah,
Two?
two of
Okay.
the big one, and now they moved it in a little bit, so it's
Yeah.
kind of neutral now.
Yeah. So yeah, how do you feel about Pete Alonso? Just like obviously, there's the fan bias for sure, but just like in fantasy, is this a guy who is still going to be consistently top three first baseman, or is there any hesitation in the makeup now that he's just a little bit older, and moving to a different team?
Yeah, I think he showed a lot of skills growth last year, which was cool to see. For a guy who's already been a really good hitter, he strikeout rate, went down from the previous year, and he was just barreling up a ton of balls and a career high hard hit rate. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. 40 homers, I think is definitely in the cards. Maybe median outcome slightly lower, but he's a great power option at a position where you almost always need power. So I like him at the price. I think he's probably the third first baseman behind Kurtz and Vladdy, but honestly, I could see him being neck and neck with Kurtz. I know that Sacramento is just the balls are flying out of there, but I do have a lot of faith in Alonso based on the track record. So I don't think he'll be bad batting average either. I know there's been years where he has been, but I have faith that he'll kind of be a four category contributor.
Yeah, I I do find it interesting that everyone's just like Nick Kurtz is clearly just going to be like one of the best first basemen, and it's like he had one really good year. I don't want to take that away from him. Sacramento is also a very easy place to hit homers, so I totally get all the hype behind it. And I was like, but what if he has the sophomore slump? That's just going to be a really big if for me in draft seasons this year about whether I want to hitch my ride to Nick Kurtz or if I'd rather take a different first baseman.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident saying I won't have any of him, but I'm sure he'll still have a really solid season.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for us with this episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Of course, you can follow the show at This Week PL. You can send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can also follow myself at the John Kuh. You can follow Patrick at P_Fitzgerald 99. And again, follow the show, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We're on all of them. Give us a 5-star review and leave a comment if you enjoy the show. Last of all, sign up for PitchList Plus. By doing so, you can join us on the Discord. One shout out, I guess PitchCon was last week. All those the streams should be available now, I think, on YouTube. I don't know if they're all the presentations are up there just yet. But if you missed any of it, definitely go check that out. A lot of good conversation on fantasy and very relevant, obviously, because drafts are coming up. But also join the Discord. We're talking baseball all the time there. And it's really good conversation and really good kind of training and to help to figure out when drafts do come up, when you're going to be ready to go before everyone else in your league. But that is it for us at This Week in Fantasy Baseball. We'll be back next time with another episode. But for Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.